40% of our imports for the United States come from the ports of Long Beach and LA. And we had 30% of the exports to those ports. We had over 851,000 tons at Ontario airports. We're one of the fastest growing airports in the United States right now. We have over 5.7 million passengers. And like I said, coming on 900,000 tons of cargo. And during COVID, that increased exponentially. From Omnitrans point of view, over the last 9 years I've been on this committee, we went from diesel to natural gas buses. Now we're doing transition to electric and also hydrogen. So for us as policymakers, how much do we push that agenda forward? At what cost can we handle in the local economy before we start exporting those businesses someplace else? AKMD puts a lot of money into technology, which I'm a futurist. I love technology. I love seeing where the future brings. And so we're help sponsor some of the new companies that want to go fully electric on their trucks. Again, do we have the infrastructure to support all those new technologies? The energy grid's not existing. One project is waiting 3 years for Edison to respond. Another one, inland port, that's said that could take as much as 6 or 7 years before the grid gets to where they want to put it on Barstow. So as we push these technologies forward, we as policymakers, local as well as county, has to figure out where we're going to put the infrastructure to support that change in technology. Infrastructure has to follow technology, and the technology has to follow the regulations, but it all comes, what comes first, what comes second. Freeways are very, very expensive. BSNF has a plan, and they proposed an inland port in Barstow. We, SBCTA, is also looking at a underground tunneling system. You may have heard about the Boring Company project. They've already done a few of those in Las Vegas.
This project really started out a few years ago with the Caltrans equity statement. And the equity index is kind of a direct response to that. And really what we wanted to do is operationalize the Caltrans equity statement and develop a data-driven definition of transportation-based priority populations. But we wanted to develop a specific one that focuses on transportation issues, specifically about making transportation easier for people, data indicators to account for equity-based outcomes in transportation, develop that data-driven definition for underserved communities or priority populations. First big purpose of this was for funding allocation, potentially another sort of project prioritization. So if we're looking at trying to figure out what projects are going to do the best on equity issues, a lot of other equity screening tools. In California, the one that is most common is CalEnviroScreen, and folks are probably familiar with that. This is different in sort of a few key ways. So first, we wanted to build something that was more granular. If you use census data, oftentimes you're limited to the census tract level. So I'll show just kind of illustrative heat maps of what these indicators look like in the Inland Empire region. On the left, you can see the traffic proximity and volume indicator. Again, that's just kind of how much traffic an area is exposed to. You can see it really lighting up around the 40 and the 10 corridors in the more rural areas. And in your kind of more dense urban areas, a lot of times you'll get cumulative impacts from highways and local arterials that have a lot of traffic volume as well. And then lastly, with the priority population screen, this is the least amount of population coverage, about 17 or 18%. So same as traffic exposure. And it's looking at those areas with high traffic burdens and poor multimodal access that are also low income and or non-white. A comparison to some other equity tools that folks here may be familiar with, and then talk about kind of our next steps. So we do a lot of comparisons to other screening tools out there, like CalEnviroScreen is the really common one. But the federal government's increasingly developing equity-related screening tools as well. In San Bernardino, EQI and CalEnviroScreen actually are pretty similar in what they cover. The Justice 40 tool covers a lot more, but it has more indicators. That was Riverside. In San Bernardino, EQI covers a little bit less than the other tools, but it's still somewhat comparable. Generally speaking, EQI is a more granular tool, and so it's going to cover less of a given population.
So the Inland Empire is pretty huge. It has 4 million in population and spread across 27,000 square miles. And so the logistic industry has a very heavy impact in the region. And so the number of medium and heavy duty trucks are pretty huge over here. but these trucks could cause sustainability issues. So hence, we need to look forward to electrification of these medium and heavy duty trucks in the region. And therefore, we are exploring opportunity charging as a solution to build a sustainable region.
So the data source, the primary source of data for our research is streetlights. So they provide the traffic data for conducting the analysis, based on which we have different traffic patterns and the traffic volume. So the sample size is nothing but the approximate trip count of the trucks. So for the medium duty trucks, we have 2.2 million, and for the heavy duty trucks, 1.8 million is the sample size of the trucks for which we conducted the study of the analysis. So now we'll be looking at the results which we have obtained from the data which we have. So there are mainly two types of results which we have. One is based on the volume and another is the origin and destination pairs. So the first one depicts as the traffic count. So this traffic count is the pass through. So any truck which passes through of all the 6 regions in our study is considered in this category. So first we have the medium duty trucks. So in medium duty trucks, as mentioned, it is a class 4 to class 6 trucks. So in the medium duty, we have the south center, that is the Riverside and the nearby areas. So this has the highest concentration of medium duty trucks with an approximate volume of 12,000. And then for the heavy duty trucks, we have the west region, which is the Rancho Cucamonga and the Ontario regions. So this has the highest one. So the least for the medium duty is the east region, which is the Coachella Valley, and the least for the heavy duty is the south region, which is the Temecula area.
Approximately 2.25 times. Most of the traffic is between 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Approximately 60% of the average daily traffic for the sub-regions that we have. Then truck trips that average 10 to 50 miles per trip favor dense charging networks and smaller batteries. And while trips that average up to 140 miles require extensive fast charging and a larger battery. Whereas the truck trips averaging from 10 to 50 minutes can benefit from off-peak use and frequent charging, whereas the trips averaging up to 2 hours require efficient charging and inter-regional coordination.
The Inland Empire has become one of the nation's largest logistic hubs. We have over 1 billion of warehouse space in the region, and it's growing. And 1 in 8 workers in our region is also connected one way or another with the logistic industry. So logistics is a very important economic engine for the region. These are trucks, and they produce quite a bit of emissions and cause air pollution and as well as noise pollution. Now, those impacts are higher near freight facilities, and by freight facilities, these include seaports, airports, rail yards, and even warehouses throughout the region. One of the most obvious impact is traffic emissions. And for diesel trucks, they produce a lot of nitrogen oxides emissions as well as fine particulate matter emissions. And both types of pollutants have been linked to a variety of diseases. And for NOx, reducing emissions from these trucks is critical, and for many reasons. First of all, about 7.5% of total greenhouse gas emission in the US come from medium and heavy duty trucks. And if we kind of zoom into just the South Coast Air Basin, 20% of NOx emissions come from this truck. Speaking of charging infrastructure, especially for trucks that require fast charging, those infrastructure is still very limited. And if we're talking about public charging stations for trucks, they are almost non-existent now. The good news is many technological solutions can help. Obviously, I already talked about new trucks that can go longer, can have longer range. And then even though nowadays the fastest charger is about 350 kilowatt, but there have been research and development efforts to develop chargers that can be as high power as 1 megawatt. We have been studying some of these innovative charging solutions. And the idea is, can we provide opportunity charging to these trucks, additional deadhead miles that are not necessary with new technologies? And because of that, it can keep these trucks' productivity high. We are analyzing real-world operation data of drayage trucks in Southern California.
SCE put out a white paper talking about our pathway to 2045. And as part of that effort, it really took a look at what we need to accomplish to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the state of California, specifically in decarbonizing the transportation sector in Southern California. We're targeting to electrify 26 million passenger cars. That's 75% of total fleet of light duty vehicles. We're looking at 900,000 medium duty vans, trucks, shuttles, which is about 67% of vehicles on the road. And then looking at the heavy duty space, we need to electrify about 170,000 of those, which is about 38% of trucks and 85% of buses. This is decarbonizing the transportation sector by about 144 million metric tons of CO2 annually. We need to look at model availability. We need to look at fueling infrastructure. And those two key things continue to be what the barriers are associated with adoption. Looking at incentives and pricing policies that target clean power opportunities, especially in vulnerable communities. So it helps prevent one customer group, being disproportionately burdened. Incentive programs that are available to our customers to take advantage of. And so some of the things that are available now are pre-owned electric vehicle rebates, $1,000 to $4,000 available to income qualified, $9 million to, those with, 6,000 EV owners, as long as you fall into a disadvantaged community or you're building, kind of ground floor up, those are still qualifying for a rebate program. And then we also have an infrastructure tariff program that we just launched recently. It's called Rule 29. And then in our medium duty chart, we have a program called Charge Ready Transport. This is basically low to no cost electrical infrastructure. It's a 5-year program. There's $343 million in budget. And so this is something that we definitely want to partner with transit agencies, disadvantaged communities.